Good morning, rock stars, and welcome to week 1 of our unit on Greek mythology and the Odyssey. I am very excited for us to get to end our year this way. Um, so this first presentation is going to give some notes on mythology and the epic poem. So as we review this presentation, you need to take notes on the content here. Please take your notes in your 3-subject notebook, either in your reader section or in your notes section. So we're going to do notes, and then we're going to review the assignment for the week, so stay tuned, and I'll give you a nice overview of what we're going to be doing and how you should get started on that. So let's start with what is mythology. Mythology as a whole refers to a collection of myths, especially one that belongs to a particular religious or cultural tradition. So different cultures have mythologies, different religions have mythology. So it can also refer to a set of stories or beliefs about a particular person, institution, or situation, especially when exaggerated or fictitious. So some things we want to note here is the element of fiction in our mythology. We also want to note that it refers to a particular religious or cultural tradition. So mythology can refer to a whole collection of myths, but a myth can also refer to just a single story. So we have a story of unknown authorship that people told long ago in an attempt to answer questions about how important things began and occurred. Things like natural phenomena, lightning, seasons changing, eclipses, beliefs about right and wrong, and religious questions, those worldview questions like why are we here, where do we go when we die. So myths try to answer questions like that. And we can see that they're a product of early humanity's desires to understand the universe. Just because they couldn't use telescopes or physics to determine how the Earth rotates and revolves around the sun and the speed at which it does so, doesn't mean that they didn't want to know about the universe and about why things are the way they are. And so myths were an attempt to create stories to understand what the universe was like. So typically in myths, we're going to see a few things. We're going to see nature getting involved, and we're going to see gods, goddesses, and heroes in our myths as well. So why did people create myths? And we kind of touched on this before, but myths have a handful of different purposes. So not every myth fulfills all of these purposes. Some myths just do a single thing. So some different reasons that people created myths are to explain how things came to be, like natural phenomena. And we can also have things like a whole creation myth that explains how the whole world came to be. Myths can be used to teach lessons and values, like the consequences of being disobedient, or myths can be used to show the importance of bravery or the importance of humility. Myths are also designed to unify a group or define a group's identity. And this was really important, back in kind of the ancient era that we're talking about. Nationalities and lines they were really kind of fluid. And so group identity was a really important way for people to be a part of a community. So people were unified by stories. And I think that's still true today. We have our MVCA stories like J term and advanced and all of those things that are kind of specific just to our group. So some other purposes for myths are to explain social or religious rituals or history, like the rivalries of different gods, and then to entertain or explain man's hopes and fears. So again, not all myths do all of these things. A certain myth might fulfill just one of these purposes. How are myths told? So we're dealing in the era that existed kind of before a lot of written language, before it was common for most people to be literate. So myths were told orally. They're part of what's called the oral tradition. So many of these ancient epics that we're talking about were sung or spoken. They were passed from generation to generation aloud, which means that these epics and myths changed slightly with each retelling. In fact, they were passed down for hundreds and hundreds of years until they were finally written down. So they were memorized by professional reciters or bards who would perform them at religious festivals. And when people would gather at these festivals, they would hear stories and then they would return to their villages and tell the story as they remembered it. So it may have been changed a little bit. And then their kids would grow up hearing that story and tell it to their kids, and it would change a little bit. So what this means is that there are many slightly different versions of Homer's epics and a lot of different myths. They have many, many different fragments and versions of the same stories because of the way that they were passed down orally. Okay, moving from mythology to epics. So an epic is a long narrative poem that tells the adventures of a hero who in some way embodies the values of his or her civilization. So a narrative poem simply means that it tells a story. It has a beginning, a middle, an end, conflicts, characters. And it's also significant for us to know that epics are found in many different cultures around the world. As early as the Epic of Gilgamesh, which comes from the Mesopotamian area, like the Fertile Crescent, kind of where our Old Testament stories are centered as well, and that's 2,000 years BC. We're going to be dealing mostly with the Odyssey and the Iliad by Homer, which are Greek myths. Epics also exist in India. There's the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, which are really interesting. I really like those stories. The Romans also created epics. We have Virgil's The Aeneid and Ovid's Metamorphoses. And Beowulf is another really popular epic. It comes from Britain. Before it was Britain, it was Britannia. So epics exist kind of across the years and across cultures. But regardless of the culture that they come from, every epic shares a few key traits. So the first is the epic hero, and the hero is kind of the center of the whole epic. He is a figure of heroic stature or national importance. He has some type of historical or legendary significance to him. We're going to see that this hero undertakes a journey and performs heroic deeds that require strength and cunning. He will possess some type of superhuman strength or craftiness or confidence. He is helped or harmed by interfering gods. He embodies the ideals and the values of his culture. So when we see a Greek hero, we know that their character embodies like Greek values. And so a Greek epic hero is going to be very different than an Indian epic hero or a Gallic epic hero or a Native American epic hero, because they're all going to embody their own individual cultures. And the last trait of an epic hero is that he emerges victorious from perilous situations. So the idea of victory is really important to our epic hero. Traits of epic poetry, numbers 2 and 3. We have an epic plot and an epic setting. So the plot of an epic typically involves a long journey full of complications and obstacles. So we'll see things like strange creatures, divine intervention, large-scale events, so things with whole armies or whole countries, and typically treacherous weather, or we're going to see a man versus nature type of conflict at some point inside that epic. And then the setting as well is very vast and grand. It involves fantastic or exotic lands, and typically more than one nation. A modern epic would definitely be Star Wars. And so Star Wars kind of fulfills all of these different categories with our epic hero, whether you're thinking about Luke or Rey or whoever. And it definitely fulfills strange creatures. You know, we have all of our aliens and our different life forms, and we're going across the whole galaxy. So that's kind of what we're thinking when we're thinking about epic plot and epic setting. So the style of epic poetry is consistent as well. We're going to hear a tone of the speaker that is elevated and grand. This isn't your average, normal, like regular Joe story. It's elevated and grand and epic. We're also going to hear the narrator be very objective, meaning that he will recount the deeds of the hero without bias. So we might see our hero do something noble and virtuous, and we're also going to see the hero do something maybe too violent or show some character flaws. And the narrator is going to show both of those sides of the hero without being biased for or against him. In an epic poem, we also see extended formal speeches. So characters will give long speeches within the epic poem to kind of carry the plot forward. And the last trait here is that it opens in media res, and this means in the middle of things. So when an epic poem opens, it starts right in the middle of the action. For example, the Iliad tells the story of the 10-year Trojan War between the Trojans and the Greeks, and the epic opens in the 9th year of that 10-year war, so we're right in the middle of the action. And the Odyssey, which is what we're going to be reading, opens the same way. We open, I think, 7 years into Odysseus's 10-year journey, so our epic poems open right in the middle of things. The last three things we're going to be looking for style-wise in our epic poems are an epic simile, an epithet, and an allusion. So we all know what a simile is, but an epic simile is a comparison of something normal with something supernatural or heroic. So for example, we might have an epic simile where the goddess Athena is swatting away arrows in a battle, like a housewife swats away like flies or mosquitoes. So we're comparing something heroic and supernatural, like a goddess and arrows, with something normal. And it's also important for us to note that this comparison takes multiple lines to be developed, okay? Multiple lines is a key aspect of that epic simile. The second thing we're going to see is an epithet, which is a brief descriptive phrase characterizing a person or a thing. So Odysseus, our main character of the Odyssey, is known by several different epithets like the son of Laertes or raider of cities. So one of my epithets could be Mrs. Sauer, teacher of English. There you go. Lastly, we're going to see a lot of allusions. We're going to see a lot of references to other Greek myths in this story. So when a narrator alludes to other Greek myths, he's making references that the audience would understand. When the narrator refers to Zeus or Agamemnon or the killer of Atreus, those are all references that the audience would have understood because they would have known those stories. So we're going to be on the lookout for other allusions.